The words hit me like a slap to the face. You don't belong here. She stood on my doorstep, designer sunglasses hiding cold eyes, a manicured finger jabbing an eviction notice toward me. Blood rushed to my head as neighbors peeked through their curtains, silently witnessing my humiliation. Little did this HOA dictator know, she had just declared war on the one person who could completely dismantle her power. You see, I didn't just own my house, I legally owned hers too. And when she finally realized that truth, her perfect little world would come crashing down. I wouldn't just win this battle, I'd tear down her entire kingdom of fear brick by brick. Let me take you back to the beginning. The California sun was beating down as I pulled into the driveway of my new home in Pinehurst Heights. After 12 years of grinding away at a financial AI development company, I had finally saved enough to buy my dream house, a beautiful Spanish-style home with terracotta roof tiles and plenty of space in the backyard for the garden I'd always wanted. Palm trees lined the immaculate, stone-paved streets, gently swaying in the breeze, and I could see the community pool shimmering in the distance. This was it. This was everything I'd worked for. I took a deep breath and smiled, feeling like I had finally made it. As I unloaded boxes from my rental truck, I mentally planned where everything would go: the home office with a view of the mountains, the kitchen bathed in morning sunlight perfect for coffee, and the small garden where I'd grow herbs and vegetables. Sure, this neighborhood was more upscale than what I was used to, but I had earned it, hadn't I? That blissful feeling lasted exactly 3 days before I met Barbara Miller. She showed up at my doorstep at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, heels clicking aggressively on my walkway like she was walking a runway instead of crossing a lawn. Everything about her screamed, "I'm in charge," perfectly coiffed blonde hair, designer sunglasses, and a clipboard clutched like a weapon. "Jason Mitchell," she said, not really asking. "I'm Barbara Miller, president of the Pinehurst Heights Homeowners Association." She didn't offer a handshake. Instead, she thrust a thick binder at me. "Here's our HOA handbook, 52 pages of regulations every homeowner must follow. I suggest you familiarize yourself with it immediately." I tried to be polite, taking the binder with a smile. "Thanks for the welcome. I'm excited to be part of the community." She looked past me at the moving boxes still stacked in my living room, visible through the open door. Her lips tightened. "Those boxes need to be disposed of within 48 hours. Visible storage containers violate Regulation 3.7. Before I could respond, she was already scrutinizing my front yard, tapping her designer heel against the grass. "The lawn is over 2 inches in several spots. That's a violation of Regulation 2.4. And what are your plans for this area?" She gestured to a small patch where I had started preparing soil for a garden. "You do have pre-approved landscaping plans, correct?" I explained that I was just planning a small vegetable garden, nothing fancy. Barbara's eyebrows rose above her sunglasses. "Any exterior modifications require committee approval before implementation. You'll need to submit a formal request with detailed plans." As she turned to leave, her parting words felt more like a threat than advice. "Welcome to Pinehurst Heights, Mr. Mitchell. We maintain very high standards here. I suggest you meet them." I watched her walk away, thinking she was just being thorough. Little did I know this was only the beginning of a nightmare. Later that day, my next-door neighbor introduced himself as David Walker, a high school history teacher who had lived in Pinehurst Heights for 8 years. His friendly smile disappeared when I mentioned meeting Barbara. "So you've met the HOA devil," he said with a grimace. "Let me guess, she already found violations with your property?" When I nodded, David sighed. "That's her specialty. She's been running this place like her personal kingdom for years. Last summer, she fined me $300 because my pride flag wasn't an approved exterior decoration. When I refused to take it down, she called my school principal claiming I was causing neighborhood disturbances. I almost lost my job." His voice dropped lower. "Once cited an elderly couple for having their curtains 2 shades darker than the approved beige. Another family got fined because their trash can was 6 inches too far from the curb. The last guy who tried fighting her ended up with so many violations and fines that he had to sell his house. I spent the next day carefully reading through the HOA handbook, and what I found was disturbing. The regulations were a contradictory maze. Lawns needed to be between 1 and 2 inches tall, but also lush and full. Holiday decorations were permitted, but only in tasteful colors that were nowhere defined. Exterior paint had to match the neighborhood aesthetic, but also be unique and characteristic. It seemed designed to create violations no matter what you did. I was determined to follow the rules to avoid trouble, so I spent Sunday removing all the boxes and making sure everything was in perfect order, at least according to what I could understand from the handbook. 3 days later, I came home from work to find an official envelope stuck to my door. Inside was a $200 fine for unauthorized construction materials visible from the street, apparently referring to those moving boxes I had already removed. The following evening, I caught Barbara and a middle-aged man in a polo shirt taking photos of my front yard. I stepped out of my car and approached them with a smile, determined to remain polite. "Good evening. Is there something I can help you with?" Barbara didn't even pretend to be embarrassed at being caught. "Frank Thompson, HOA Board Secretary," the man mumbled without meeting my eyes. Barbara pointed to the small area where I had been preparing my garden. "Do you have approved plans for this landscape modification? Because if not, that's another violation." I explained that I had just submitted the request form that morning as instructed in the handbook. Barbara smiled thinly. "Requests take 30 to 60 days for approval. Until then, any modifications or violations subject to daily fines." As they walked away, I noticed my other neighbors quickly closing their curtains, as if afraid of being seen watching the interaction. That night, I checked my security camera footage and discovered Barbara had returned 3 times during the day, once with a measuring tape to check the distance from my mailbox to the curb. I began to understand. This wasn't about maintaining community standards. This was about control and intimidation. As I scrolled through the HOA handbook again, I realized it was deliberately designed with contradictory rules that made it impossible to be fully compliant. The next morning, I found an unsigned note in my mailbox that simply read, "You don't belong here." I stood on my front porch, looking out at the perfect houses with their perfect lawns, and felt a chill despite the warm California sun. "I've been too nice," I whispered to myself. "If she wants to play this game, then let's play it." At midnight, my phone lit up with an email from the HOA. Violation number 5. What was it this time? Excessive window illumination after 10 p.m. The joke was, I hadn't even been home last night. I was working late at the office. In just 2 weeks, Barbara had unleashed a barrage of absurd violations: a mailbox 3/4 of an inch too tall, a garage door open more than 30 minutes while unloading groceries, and my personal favorite, excessive bird activity because hummingbirds had discovered my flowers. Each violation carried fines ranging from $200 to $500, creating a pattern that was impossible to dismiss as random enforcement. I hadn't paid any of them yet, but the threats were escalating. The latest notice mentioned potential liens against my property. After the 5th violation, I decided it was time to get professional help. I called my college friend Megan Taylor, who had become a real estate attorney specializing in homeowner disputes. When I explained my situation, she wasn't surprised. HOAs have become notorious for this kind of behavior, she explained over coffee at a local cafe. They're powerful groups that often operate unchecked, unlike other organizations that face strict oversight. Megan shuffled through the violation notices, her frown deepening. Some of these aren't even in your HOA regulations. Others are extreme interpretations, like this one about the mailbox height. The Postal Service regulates mailboxes, not HOAs. And this garden violation? Your handbook says landscaping projects require approval, but it doesn't prohibit preparing the soil. Barbara is making up rules as she goes. I ran my hands through my hair, a nervous habit becoming more frequent. So, what can I do? I'm not paying hundreds of dollars in fake violations. Megan suggested I try to rally some neighbors first to see if others had similar experiences. HAs thrive on isolation. If you're fighting alone, you're easy to pick off. But united homeowners can force change. Taking her advice, I decided to host a small backyard barbecue that weekend, inviting David and a few other neighbors I'd managed to meet. To my surprise, about a dozen people showed up, though most seemed nervous, constantly glancing around as if afraid of being seen. Over burgers and beers, I heard horror story after horror story about Barbara's reign of terror. An older couple, the Johnsons, had been fined repeatedly for their grandson's toys being visible in their yard until they could no longer afford to have him visit. A Mexican-American family had been cited for excessive holiday decorations during Dia de los Muertos, ultimately forcing them to sell their home when the fines became unmanageable. Barbara targets anyone who doesn't fit her vision of what Pinehurst Heights should be, explained an elderly woman who refused to give her name, fearing retribution. The most disturbing revelation came from David. There's no actual inspection process, he explained quietly. Barbara is the only one who issues violations. There's no committee, no oversight, no appeals process, despite what the handbook claims. Frank just rubber stamps whatever she decides. Another neighbor, a single mother named Lisa, added, "The funny thing is, board members never get violations. Frank's house has peeling paint on the backside, but it's never been cited. It's all about who Barbara likes and who she doesn't." Everyone fell silent as a car slowly drove past my house. It wasn't Barbara, but the fear in my neighbor's eyes told me everything about the climate of intimidation she had created. Just as we were wrapping up the gathering, a sleek Mercedes pulled up in front of my house. Barbara stepped out, camera in hand, and began taking photos of all the cars parked on the street. "Unauthorized neighborhood event," she announced loudly, not bothering to approach. $500 fine. Expect the notice tomorrow. True to her word, the violation notice appeared on my door the next morning. This time, I didn't just file it away. I emailed the HOA board, formally contesting the violation. Citing the exact section in the handbook that allowed casual gatherings with fewer than 20 people. The response came quickly, not from the board, but from Barbara herself. She claimed my barbecue had violated noise restrictions and caused parking congestion. The message warned that further challenges would result in additional fines for frivolous appeals. It ended with a thinly veiled threat: continued disruption of neighborhood harmony could lead to more serious consequences. From that point on, things escalated. My security cameras captured Barbara standing in front of my house almost daily, taking photos, making notes, and clearly trying to intimidate me. Neighbors who had attended my backyard gathering began avoiding eye contact when I waved. One even apologized quietly, saying they couldn't risk becoming Barbara's next target. Megan suggested I take a closer look at the HOA's finances. As a homeowner, I had the legal right to access financial records, and if Barbara was using fines as a personal revenue stream, it could be my leverage. When I emailed the HOA treasurer requesting those documents, I received a short reply stating the records were currently under audit and unavailable. When I pressed again, citing California law, which requires HOAs to make financial information accessible, I was told the audit might take 6 to 8 months. Clearly, this wasn't going anywhere helpful. That evening, I called Megan again. "My company develops AI for mortgage data analysis," I explained. "Sometimes we buy debt portfolios to train our systems. I wonder if we can find anything in public records about properties here in the neighborhood." Megan thought it was worth a shot. HOA board members often had financial interests beyond just their homes, contractor ties, property connections, or other hidden relationships. If there were conflicts of interest, we might finally have something solid to work with. The next day, I discovered my name had been added to a no-access list posted at the community pool entrance. A young girl stood outside looking sad, waiting alone. David whispered beside me, "That's Barbara's daughter. She waits for her mom here every day by herself." I watched the girl kick at the ground, shoulders slumped. For the first time, I saw something beyond my own frustration, a glimpse into what might be driving Barbara's obsession with control. As I walked home, I resolved to dig deeper, not just for myself, but for everyone suffering under her rule. Something wasn't right in Pinehurst Heights, and I was determined to find out why. Data never lies, and these numbers were telling a very interesting story. My dining table was covered with printouts, property records, old HOA financial statements, contractor invoices shared by a sympathetic neighbor, and notes from conversations with other homeowners. 3 days of intense research had uncovered patterns that couldn't be coincidence. Barbara had been HOA president for 8 years, but the last official election had only happened 6 years ago. According to the bylaws, elections should occur every 2 years. Even more suspicious, the HOA had hired the same landscaping company, Premier Outdoor Solutions, for 5 straight years, despite their quotes being consistently 30 to 40% higher than market rates. A quick business search revealed that Premier was owned by Barbara's brother-in-law. "This is textbook self-dealing," Megan said, reviewing my findings. Using HOA funds to hire family members at inflated rates is illegal under California Civil Code. And the election issue? Another clear violation. State law requires regular elections with proper notice to all homeowners. I nodded, feeling both vindicated and furious. "There's more. Look at this fine revenue." I showed her a spreadsheet tracking estimated fine income based on what neighbors had shared. The HOA collected around $50,000 in fines last year, but only $15,000 appeared in the financial reports. "Where's the rest?" Megan's eyes widened. "If she's pocketing that money, that's embezzlement. This isn't just a civil issue, it's criminal." But we needed more proof. My investigation was revealing a pattern of exploitation and misconduct far beyond petty tyranny. With Megan's help, I reached out to former HOA board members who had moved away. One former treasurer, now living in Arizona, provided key insight. I was forced out after questioning some invoices, he explained over the phone. Barbara collected fines in cash, claiming it was easier for homeowners, but only some of that money made it into the official accounts. When I asked for receipts, she accused me of questioning her integrity and had me removed from the board. He sent me copies of his notes showing discrepancies between reported fine collections and bank deposits. The puzzle pieces were coming together, but I still needed stronger evidence to take real action. During my research, I also discovered that my company had acquired a mortgage debt portfolio that included loans from our neighborhood. Though I couldn't access specific details without a formal business reason, it gave me another angle to explore. Meanwhile, Barbara seemed to sense I was onto something. The harassment intensified. My mailbox overflowed with new violation notices, some so absurd they were almost laughable. One cited me for excessive bird activity near residents because hummingbirds had discovered the flowers I'd planted. When I formally contested each violation, citing relevant sections of the HOA handbook, Frank Thompson personally delivered a letter to my door. "Your continued resistance is creating a hostile environment," he said nervously, avoiding eye contact. "Things will get much worse if you don't fall in line. Barbara has ways of making people leave when she wants them gone." I received an invoice for $1,500 in accumulated violations, demanding payment within 10 days. Megan warned me, this isn't just HOA overreach anymore. Falsifying violation notices constitutes fraud under California law. What she's doing has criminal implications. The most revealing moment came unexpectedly when I met the previous owner of my house at a local coffee shop. I recognized her from a photo on the real estate listing and introduced myself. Her expression darkened when I mentioned my address. "Oh, you're the one who bought my house. Good luck. You'll need it." Over the next half hour, she shared her nightmare. Barbara had targeted her family with relentless violations shortly after they renovated. Nothing we did was ever good enough. The fines kept coming until we couldn't afford to fight anymore. She paused before adding something chilling. The weird thing is, she seemed specifically fixated on our house, not just generally mean like she is with others. I asked why. She wanted our house for her daughter, the woman said. They had been renting after her divorce, and ours was the perfect size and location. But they couldn't afford it when it first went on the market. I think she was trying to drive us out so they could get it cheaper. Then someone else bought it before they could. That someone was you. Suddenly, everything made sense. I wasn't just any new neighbor. I was the person who had unknowingly thwarted Barbara's plans. This wasn't random harassment, it was personal. That evening, my security cameras caught Barbara standing in front of my house with her daughter trailing silently behind. This should have been our home, she told the girl, unaware her words were recorded. People like him don't deserve to live here. Her daughter didn't respond, just stared at the ground. There was something heartbreaking in the girl's posture, shoulders hunched, physically distancing herself from her mother even while standing beside her. I was beginning to see Barbara not just as a villain, but as someone whose desperation had twisted into cruelty. Later that night, I found my garage door spray painted with a message, "Not for people like you." The message was clear, but so was my resolve. This had gone beyond HOA disputes into harassment, possibly even hate crimes. My camera had captured a hooded figure spraying the message at 2 a.m., but the image was too blurry for identification. Still, the timing right after I started digging into the HOA finances seemed far from coincidental. I reported the vandalism to the police. They took a report but warned it would be difficult to prove who was responsible. The next morning, as I scrubbed the paint off my garage door, David came over to help. "This has gone too far," he said, looking genuinely disturbed. "Barbara's been terrible to many people, but this is a new level." After we finished cleaning up, he invited me inside for coffee and shared something important. He had been keeping a journal of HOA abuses for years, documenting every questionable fine and selective enforcement he'd witnessed. "I've been too scared to use it," he admitted. "But maybe it's time." With mounting evidence and growing neighbor support, I decided it was time to confront Barbara publicly. The monthly HOA meeting was coming up in 3 days, the perfect opportunity to bring everything into the light. Plastic chairs were arranged in neat rows. Every eye followed me as I entered. No smiles. Just silence. Just silence. I could feel the weight of every gaze as I walked toward the front row. Barbara sat at the head of a long table, her back straight, chin lifted like royalty surveying her court. Frank Thompson sat beside her, nervously adjusting his glasses. The room was packed, more people than I'd ever seen at an HOA meeting. Word had gotten around. I took a deep breath and stood up. "Good evening," I began, my voice steady. "My name is Jason Mitchell. I'm the homeowner who bought the house Barbara Miller tried to run out of this neighborhood." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "I didn't come here to argue about mailbox heights or hummingbirds," I continued. "I came to talk about something far more important: abuse of power, financial misconduct, and the destruction of community trust." I placed a stack of documents on the table, copies of property records, financial discrepancies, contractor ties, and testimonies from former board members and neighbors. Megan had helped me organize everything into clear, undeniable evidence. "I've reviewed 5 years' worth of HOA financials," I said, holding up a highlighted report. "Over $35,000 in fine revenue has gone unaccounted for. At the same time, our landscaping company, owned by Barbara's brother-in-law, has been overcharging the HOA by tens of thousands each year." Gasps filled the room. Barbara stood abruptly, chair screeching across the floor. "This is ridiculous. This man is making wild accusations with no proof." I turned to face her directly. "No, Barbara. You're the one making things up. Every violation you issued against me was fabricated. You rewrote the rules to suit yourself. And worse, you targeted families, minorities, single parents, and anyone who didn't fit your image of what Pinehurst Heights should be. I paused, letting it sink in. But the real kicker? I added. You tried to drive out a family so your daughter could move into their home. And when that didn't work, you targeted me. You thought I'd fold like the others. But you picked the wrong guy. The room erupted not in chaos, but in voices rising together, sharing stories, frustrations, and, finally, courage. David stood up. Then Lisa. Then the Johnsons. One by one, neighbors came forward with their own accounts, documented fines, biased enforcement, intimidation tactics. It was all there. And now everyone could see it. Barbara remained frozen, her mask cracking for the first time. Her eyes darted to the exits like she wanted to flee, but there was nowhere to go. Frank finally spoke, barely above a whisper. What do we do now? Megan stepped in, offering a simple solution. You vote. Right now. For new leadership. And you start the process of auditing the HOA with an independent third party. There was a motion, a second, and then a show of hands. The vote was overwhelming. Barbara was removed from the board on the spot. She left without a word. The next week, the county opened an investigation into the missing funds. Premier Outdoor Solutions was suspended indefinitely. And slowly, Pinehurst Heights began to change. Neighbors started talking again. Not behind curtains, but outside, in the open. We formed a new committee, transparent, elected, accountable. Even David joined. As for me, I kept working on my garden. Hummingbirds still visit every morning. And I smile every time I pull into my driveway, knowing that I didn't just protect my home, I helped restore a community. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder if Barbara's daughter ever found her own version of peace. Maybe one day, she will too. Thanks for watching. If you liked this story, hit subscribe and drop a comment below. Have you ever faced a HOA nightmare? Or someone like Barbara? Let's hear your story.